Welcome to Spiritual as Fuck,
Spiritual as Fuck.
a podcast where we explore everything outside of the ordinary. I'm Liz Volpe. I'm a social entrepreneur, now psychic medium, teacher and mentor, with a huge passion to inspire people to dream big and change the world.
I'm Diane Driscoll, a coach, facilitator and speaker. I'm also a psychic intuitive, learning to incorporate my spiritual gifts into my life and business.
We're here today to share real and raw spiritual stories. It's going to give you a safe space to challenge what's normal and have some serious fun along the way.
We hope you're ready to get spiritual as fuck. Hey everyone, can you believe it that we are already on episode 11 of the Spiritual as Fuck podcast? And Liz and I are so grateful to all of you, our listeners, that have joined along, whether it's on Apple or Spotify or your podcast platforms. If you haven't done it already, please click that follow button or that lovely love heart on Spotify to just join along so you get notifications as soon as we launch our next episode. And as we reflected on the past 10 episodes along our journey, we had such incredible guests, beautiful, dedicated listeners. And we also reflected on the fact of all of the signs and synchronicities that we've had to do with the podcast, but also across our whole spiritual journey. And now many of these things, they just pop up along the way and we dismiss them early on thinking, it's just a coincidence. It's not something that's really, worth paying attention to. But on the spiritual journey, we started to notice that these things ramp up once you have your spiritual awakening, and they become like a best friend to you as you go along your spiritual journey. And we, Liz and I, have had so many of these pop up. So we're going to share some of our experiences today, but we also will love to know, as always, on our Instagram account from each of you, what are some of the things that you have found to be signs and synchronicities on your journey. But something that you may not know is the term synchronicity actually came from Carl Jung, so famous Swiss psychologist and psychiatrist, who coined the term and quoted it as a meaningful coincidence of two or more events where something other than the probability of chance is involved. So yes, things are happening by coincidence, but it's more than that. So let's dive in. Let's explore all things signs and synchronicities. So Liz, tell me, how do they show up for you? What do signs and synchronicities look like in your life?
Oh, don't you just love getting signs? I feel like looking back, signs have come in so many different ways for me, but I get the common ones. My favorite is seeing the 1111 or the ones everywhere I go. That is just kind of my little guidepost to show me that I'm on the right track. But looking back, there's been so many situations where I've been given these crazy signs, to point me in one particular direction. And that has gone from overhearing someone's conversation while sat on the bus going to work through to, thinking about something or having a conversation about one particular decision I've been really trying to come to the answer for, and then getting in the car, turning the radio on, hearing that exact bit of the song that gives me the answer, gives me that validation,
Yeah, I hear you.
So many good ones. And I love this whole idea of signs and synchronicities. And, the fact that at first, when we start to receive these kind of messages from the universe or this guidance, we go, well, that was just a coincidence.
Yes.
And it's funny, isn't it? Because when you think about coincidence versus synchronicity, they're kind of on the very opposite ends of the spectrum. So, when you get a sign or something start to happen the first time, you can say, oh, that's definitely a coincidence.
Yeah.
But then when it happens 2 or 3 or 5, then you've got to go, okay, this is a bit crazy now. That is how I decipher when something is an actual legitimate sign or synchronicity from either the universe, my spirit guides, a loved one in spirit, or whatever you want to believe where that comes from.
Yeah, totally agree, because I know that so much of this ramped up for me at the time, like, during spiritual awakening. And it was one of the things, all of a sudden I'm noticing numbers. So 1111 was a massive one for me as well. Songs, another massive one for me. My bees were something that, because my granddad would, it's always a sign for my granddad. But I would have dismissed a lot of these things previously, but then it's almost like, they're just flashing up in front of you all the time. You've got no choice, and you start to realize what is going on. Because for 1111, I started taking screenshots on my phone every time it would come up with it. Like, I mean, if I couldn't bring myself to delete them, because it was like, no, this was my way of, at the time, I'm not going crazy. This stuff is actually happening. And my family laugh at me because I mentioned it so many times. So when I went home last year to Ireland for my grandmother's funeral, and literally from the minute I left Australia, flying to Ireland, even driving on the motorway from Dublin to Cork, it was like the road was 120 kilometers an hour. But every time I looked at the speedo, it was 111. Every time I looked at a signpost, it was 11 kilometers to the next town, or there was 11s. And I'm like, what is going on here? And I had told my family about this, my mum and my sisters. And they were like thinking I was completely cuckoo. So then I started sending them the screenshots and photographs. So now it's an in-joke with our family. Here she is with the 1111s again.
Diane and the ones.
But they're doing it too. It's like, so I think definitely, whether you call them angel numbers but numbers for me was one of the very first signs. So when you started out, I guess, started really tuning in after your spiritual awakening, was it numbers, or was there like an object that's like, what back then in the beginning that made you move from this is a coincidence to know, okay, there's something really happening here that I need to pay attention to?
I mean, numbers have always been a really big thing for me. Yeah, I find that the minute you are tapping into intuition, synchronicity and signs follow. It's an automatic thing. So if you're raising your vibration, you're starting to do things like being mindful, meditate, walks in nature. You're tapping in, you're plugging in to that universal energy. And then suddenly your awareness is a little bit more open, because these things happen all the time to all of us. It's just that when you are going through a time of being more intuitive, your awareness is more open. So the universe constantly will throw things. So yeah, numbers definitely. When I think I mentioned once before that we bought a new house, and the house settled on the 11th of the 11th. So 11th of November at 11:11. And I laughed so much when I got that email. Yeah, the email came from the mortgage or the real estate, whoever it was sends the email. And that was the time on the email. And I was like, wow, how can I have any doubt that this house is not the right house for me to move into? So that type of thing. But just even small things like unexpected nudges at the right time. I've been given nudges to take action on things, and the universe will continue to nudge me, whether that be through a dream, whether it's I overhear that conversation, just to actually take action on something. On the opposite side of the thing, one reoccurring thing that has always happened to me my entire life is getting hesitation on certain things.
Yes. Yeah.
Something not feeling quite right, but me having no knowing or explanation on that. So there's been various times, as an example, where I've been attempting to book a flight back to England.
Yes.
And all of a sudden, every time I get to the click to book now, the whole website crashes and you have to start again, and then it crashes again. If I'm getting 3 blocks from the universe, that is my big sign. Do not do this. There will be something that turns up. There will be an explanation that comes on why you should not book that flight then. So that is a thing that I'm really pay attention to when I get that feeling.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that, because when I think of signs and synchronicities, for me, most of the time they're positive, or they're a nudge in the right direction. They're like, I do have the ones that are almost like a call for a course correction, or, do this instead of this. But how you're mentioning that 3 times if you're trying to do something, and that happens so much to me, but I'm not as conscious or intentional about tuning into that as I am to the more positive signs. And back in the beginning, I think I would have looked into, I'd have been looking up, what does, 222 mean? What does 555 mean? Whereas now I think I've gotten kind of used to what some of those mean, but it's less about what I'm being told that they mean and more that what was I thinking about at that point in time? What was I doing? Is there a decision that I was about to make? Is there a reason that this keeps coming up? Because I know when I was planning to go back to Ireland to buy a house, so like this was up in the air whether I was going to buy this house or not. The flights back to Ireland were so expensive before Christmas, so everything seemed to be going against me. But I kept seeing 333. And, I did look that one up because it wasn't an overly familiar number to me, but it was like, your ancestors or, spirit guides are kind of protecting you or guiding you. But this kept coming up, and the closer it was getting to, okay, I wrote it off, I'm not getting home for Christmas. And one day just decided, I'd seen 333 so many times, I just thought, just going to check Flight Center, which was not where I was looking for my flights. And all of a sudden, way cheaper flights came up via the US that was with Delta Airlines. And it was like, oh my God, okay, here's an alternative that I can do. But everything to do with buying the house, every time it seemed like something was against me, that this is not going to happen, like a building inspection report that had, all the terrible things that were wrong that needed to be fixed, I would always see 333. And it kept, to me, it was like, no, these are good signs. Don't take it as bad. You will get the flight, you will get the house, you will, everything will fall into place. And it absolutely did. So now anytime I see 333, it's like, oh, I look at it affectionately and think, that's good. Somebody's looking out for me up there.
Well, like Gabrielle Bernstein's very correct when she says the universe has your back.
Yes.
Because, whatever that magical power is around us and whatever you believe, it operates and exists by sending us these signs to actually just get us in the flow. It wants us to feel aligned. It wants the best for us. So if you can start to tap in and be open to just even recognizing maybe those signs that are coming in and start to even journal them and jot them down, the minute you do that, you'll start to see it's like a ripple effect. They suddenly, they start everywhere. And I love that example you just gave, Diane. And that's, something that I've got so many stories on too, of everything's looking like it's just something's not meant to happen. And then at exactly the right time, that flight comes up and it suddenly just takes you in a different direction.
And I think what you're saying about, journaling it or starting to tune into it more, because I remember I went through that. So for me, it was screenshots, not necessarily, journaling about it. But then it got to the point where I'm actually going to ask for signs. So some of the times when you're feeling you're going crazy on this spiritual journey, or that you're feeling overwhelmed with how much life is changing, because so much does change for you. So I started then like putting it out there intentionally and saying, I need a sign if I'm going on the right direction, or send me a sign if this is the right decision, or I want to, like for me, even for some of the people that I follow on Instagram, like of all places, it's like, okay, that's where I'm looking for my divine guidance. It's like, okay, from this particular person, I want to hear a message if this is right. And it comes back to me. It's because even in the last 2 weeks, I've bought, so I had to sell a car and buy a car. And but probably shouldn't have done this, but late one night decided, so I'd gotten the call, I'm interested in looking at your car. So late at night, 9:30 at night, going off to a petrol station to, someone to view my car, complete stranger, never met him before. And I'm thinking, I'm off my head. Why am I doing this? This is actually unsafe for me to do. But I felt fine, my sense of inner knowing and, just tuning into the energy. I was like, this is okay. But as I was driving there, I was like, okay, I need a sign. So just give me a sign if this is the right person to sell to. And now for most people, they would think, oh, I'm just going to sell to anyone. But for me, the car needed work, and I was being completely open about this. But I just thought I wanted to be someone who is ready to do the work that is needed to do up the car. That's fine. Went. And so here I am showing the car, had done all the things. And then I'm like, okay, where is the sign? I'm not seeing this sign anywhere. Okay, maybe this is not the right person. And then the guy leaned over the engine to look in at the oil or whatever. And on the belt loop on the back of his jeans or his work trousers, the number 11 was there. And I'm like killing myself laughing, thinking, there's the sign. There's the sign. It is. And for me, 11's my birthday as well, but 11 has always been. So that was my sign to buy the car. Then when I was, to sell the car, when I was buying my car, same thing, driving to go and see this new car, put it out to the universe. Okay, I need a sign. And as I was pulling into the place, a phone call or a message came up, on the screen on my dash of the car. But the phone number was just 11. So it didn't say a person's name. It didn't give a full phone number. It just said 11. And I'm like, okay, that is bizarre. That is random. So again, it was like, okay, fantastic. And in both instances, it was the first person that I saw to sell and the first car that I looked at to buy. Like, just perfect.
See, you just can't make that stuff up.
Exactly. Yeah.
I actually have such a cool story to share, actually, on the talk of all signs and synchronicities, and in a slightly different way. So we recently launched an episode where I mentioned my nanny, who is my grandma, Evelyn. To cut a long story short, I was halfway back to England. Myself, my husband, my kids, we decided to stop in Dubai. And I don't know why I started to think this, but one day I was laid on the beach in Dubai and I was reading a book, I think on, I don't know, it was a spiritual book of some sorts. I think it was stories on contacting your loved ones in heaven. So I was reading all these beautiful stories of people receiving signs directly from their loved ones in heaven. And I was like, wow, I really have not thought about my nanny for years. This was a few years ago, right before COVID started. And I was like, I suddenly felt super emotional. And right there in Dubai, luckily no one really around me, I started to have this conversation with my nanny, Evelyn. And I had my journal with me and I just kind of sat there and I said to her, I apologized. And I'm like, Nanny, I am so sorry that I have not been speaking to you. Like, it's not that I've forgotten that you're there. I know that you're around, but life's been busy. And I gave her kind of this update on life. The fact that I was on my way back to England and I was excited because feel a bit closer to her being back, on the English soil. And at the very end of this conversation, I remembered something from in the book. And I decided to say to my nanny, look, if there is any way that you can show me that you have heard my message, I would love you to send me a sign. Yeah. It can be anything. And I promise I will stay aware from this point on, just any type of a sign. And I kind of put my journal together and kind of got on with my day and went and met back up with the kids and et cetera, life carried on. But that evening I called my mum in the UK just to clarify my flight time, my arrival time into the UK, which was the next day. And we were in the process of organizing the plans when she stopped me. And she was like, oh my goodness, you're not going to believe what we found today. Your stepdad, Chris, he was emptying the room to make space for us to get there and stay in the house. And so he'd been basically putting loads of things in boxes and taking it up to the loft, because for anyone that doesn't know, in England, we have this thing called a loft, which is a big space in the roof and you need ladders to climb up and you basically put all your shit in there. So he'd been putting boxes and boxes of shit in the loft. Now, they're always in the loft. But for some reason this day, he opened and found a box that they hadn't seen before. And he brought this box down. And when my mum opened the box, she pulled out this doll. And my mum said, you're not going to believe it. I found the doll that your nanny made you when you were born.
Oh, gosh.
And I was like, what? Sorry? What did you say? She went, your nanny, Evelyn, made you a doll, handmade you a doll when you were born. And I didn't even know that we had this doll, but we just found it. And no joke, my stomach sank. I actually burst into tears.
Oh gosh,
I was like,
there
Mum,
was
you
your
don't
sign.
even understand the significance of what you've just said to me. And I told her the story of how literally a few hours before I'd asked for this particular sign. And that was enough for me. I was like, thank you for the sign. You are around. You have heard me.
Yeah.
Yeah, really
That
amazing.
that is so beautiful. But it is when you ask for the sign. So it's one thing getting the signs, but then when we do ask, like, give me a sign that you're, whether it's to a person who's, passed and in spirit, or a sign, is this the right decision to make? Is this the right purchase? Is this the right, job to take?
Yes.
Whatever it might be. But if you put it out there and then, so don't put it out there and then, put on your blinkers. It's like, no, generally when it comes back to you like that, there's no way you can dismiss that as just a coincidence. There's too much meaning associated with it for it just to be a
Mhm.
coincidence.
That's right. And it is this whole thing of asking. The
Yeah.
universe will not step in. Your loved ones in spirit will not step in and intervene. Only when you invite them in or ask for that sign or ask for that support to find the answer will you actually get the help you're asking for. So asking for a sign, it's not hard. It's literally just asking, whether,
Exactly.
you're not comfortable really sat there asking out loud. You just want to go to a journal and you want to just write down that question and request that sign. But yeah, you're right. You've got to stay aware and open to how that sign is going to come, because it can come in so many different ways.
Yeah. And it is, and it's up to you then what you make of it when it comes through. And again, like a grandparent example, when I was buying the car. So I did a call out to my granddad and I just like, can you just help me find the right car? Can you help, because like I'm not mechanically minded. I'm not someone who, and I was buying privately. So I was like, okay, but nervous about this, haven't done this before, and yes, I trust my gut and my intuition, but it was like, yeah, if I can get a bit of extra support, that will be good. But so I felt his presence with me the whole way through.
Oh,
And not that I associated the 11s with him, but yesterday going to the car, just opened the boot of the car, and there was a bee stuck in the like between, like literally where you would close the boot between, like it should have
wow.
been crushed, but it wasn't. And I'm like, oh my God, what are you doing there? And like everybody in my family has such an affinity with bees because my granddad was a beekeeper. So like I'm like, hey little guy. And then I'm like, oh,
Oh,
there's granddad. I'm like, okay, but then I started to overanalyze it and think, okay, what's the extra message with the fact that you're
yeah, don't do
caught
that.
between and you didn't? And it's like, well, okay, times are you feel like you might be crushed between two things, but you're not. You're okay. You're doing good. And it literally stayed there for a moment or two and then flew off. And I was like, oh, filled with love and joy and thinking, yeah, I am
Oh,
being looked after. I am being watched.
yeah.
It's yeah, but I think we shouldn't overanalyze them either. Like sometimes we go down the rabbit hole, or in the beginning, we're starting to look on Google to find out, okay, well, what does 333 mean? What does, 2222 mean? What do all these things mean? Or, oh, I keep seeing hawks, or I keep seeing butterflies. What do these mean? And sometimes we end up going down a complete rabbit
Yes.
hole. And I think that's part of the journey in the beginning. It's like you're sense making, you're trying to make sense of things. But at the end of the day, just tuning into, well, what does it mean to me, regardless? And it's
Mm,
fine to look up something every once in a while. Like I still will, just if I'm thinking, oh, what was that all about? But I'm not going to go looking at multiple different pages or end up, spending a load of time over analyzing, because you lose the value of the message in the moment. And a
yeah.
lot of the time it is just a little nudge or a little, hey, you're on the right track.
That's right. And you know what, this is where intuition comes in, because
Yeah.
seeing the sign, you've got to go to inwards, what intuitively does that sign mean? And animals are huge signs for people, from loved ones, from the universe, birds, dragonflies. I'm sure there's a lot of
Yes.
people listening today that see dragonflies quite often, as a huge meaning. So you've got to kind of identify and find your own signs and symbols, and then again, like, journal it and keep a note, and then just actually see how many times the universe will prove that that is your sign.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And if it is things like, I know for me, if I think in terms of animals, so the things that always appear for me are bees, and bees are always related to my granddad, always. But the symbol of a stag, so it doesn't have to be seeing a stag, because I haven't seen too many of them since I've been in Australia. But like a stag, a kingfisher, or a kookaburra. So the two of those together, depending on which side of the world I'm on. But they're things that always have meaning. They will always pop up at really kind of auspicious times. There's something that it is here to tell me. But then there are other people who it's butterflies, it's dragonflies, or they find a penny, like a penny, a coin or money.
Feathers.
Whereas, yeah, I don't, and feathers, I've never had, whereas I know lots of people, feathers are a huge sign for them.
Oh, can I share a feather story,
Oh,
actually?
go.
And yeah, I've found feathers over the years that have been quite significant signs, but last year I just had the most beautiful sign. So my auntie passed away quite a number of years ago, and for some reason, one day, one of my family members sent me a text message, and it was Google Earth. And I don't know why, but they Google Earthed her house. And you're not going to believe it. When we looked in the picture, she was in the garden of Google Earth. So obviously, the car that takes the pictures for Google Earth had gone past 10 years earlier and taken a picture of her. And she was in the garden, which was her favorite place. So we were like, oh my God, Auntie Helen, she's on the internet on Google Earth. Oh my God. So we were having this conversation, and I had my brother on loudspeaker while we were looking at the picture. As we're doing this, I had a canvas on my wall that flew off the wall behind me. So I was like, I jumped. I'm always a bit scared of anything like that anyway. Yeah. And my brother was laughing like, it's a coincidence. And I'm like, I think that was Auntie Helen. He was like, stop being stupid. Anyway, so I kind of was like, all right, don't be stupid. Put the picture back on the wall. And then after I'd finished the call, I was like, Auntie Helen, if that was you, you're going to have to show me a little bit better than that, because that was quite scary. Give me a nice sign just to show me validation that was you. Went to bed, woke up in the morning. My daughter came and jumped on me, sat on me, and then pointed to the wall behind my head and was like, Mum, what's that? And I looked up, so behind me to the bed, and I had a big canvas hanging above my bed. There was a huge white feather sticking down behind the canvas, pointing down towards my head. Oh my! I was like, how on earth has a feather, number one, got in my house, number two, behind my head while I'm asleep, stuck behind a canvas? Yeah.
There's too many coincidences there.
So I was laughing, thanks, Auntie Helen. Okay, you're around. So play around with this, everyone. Like, honestly, I really suggest you play around with this, and we'd love to hear your stories.
Absolutely.
Have you got those synchronicity stories that you can only tell a select few friends? If yes, that's why we exist. Exactly. And that's why you should actually come to our event, the channel, which is happening on the 7th of June, right? That is why this new event exists, for people to be able to come together and share the stories that you normally can't share with your bunch of friends.
Exactly. And you know what? Even if you're a person who thinks, well, I don't have a lot of these synchronicities going on, it's amazing what you do have when you tune into it. So even hearing other people's stories, whether it's us sharing now, or, if you come along to the channel, hearing what other people are sharing, it makes you then suddenly start realizing, oh, that one time when such and such happened, or I saw this feather, then you start to realize that you've had these as well. And it means that your kind of antenna or your radar towards these signs and synchronicities starts to ramp up a little bit more as well. But we love each other's stories, never mind hearing what other people are sharing with us as well. And I do think that signs and synchronicities aren't always, like, for me, for the most part, they're good. They're never things that are, scary, or I never feel fearful with them. But I did have one time, this is quite a few years ago now, walked into my dining room and there was this massive bang against the window. And I'm like, what was that? And it was a bird. A bird had flown into the window. And I I think it's an Irish, maybe superstition thing anyway, but for me, instantly in that moment froze and knew someone important to me had passed away. And I couldn't shake the feeling. So I was like waiting for a phone call, waiting to hear news, just knowing that something really big had happened. And in my mind, it was either a car crash and someone was severely hurt, or it was someone had passed away. And it was New Year's Eve. And while I was out New Year's Eve at the fireworks, got a message that a very close friend of mine that I grew up with and went to school with had suddenly passed away, unexplained, same age as me. So for me, it was like, oh my gosh, that was like, and I guess for me to the connection between us, no matter the miles or the years apart or that, the fact that something had happened in my life that let me know, okay, almost like prepare yourself, you're going to get really big news. So it kind of like, not that you can soften the blow for something like that, but it had me prepared to receive
Oh,
really
Diane,
bad
I'm so
news.
sorry
But
to hear that.
I'm
And
sure I'm not alone in that, because I know a
no,
lot of people, and Irish people are superstitious at the best of times. So we do tune into, like, I mean, this is, part of pagan heritage as well. It's like we tune into those signs and synchronicities, and when they happen, paying attention to them.
And honestly, I'm really passionate when I say this, is that this is why people should start to understand and develop their intuition.
Yeah.
Because really what you're talking about there is a psychic sense. Every one of us has psychic senses. It's just that we don't know how to develop them. But
Yes.
when you start to get senses of feelings, thoughts, how many of us have thought of a friend and then they call us a few minutes later?
Yeah.
That is a sign from the universe. Call this person, they need your help. How many times have you called a friend and they're like, oh my God, you've just called at exactly the right time. I really needed to speak to you. You must have known that something was going on for me. Yeah. So all of these kind of opportunities that we get to sync up and align are there. So I highly recommend you get really curious and learn, what psychic senses that you might have, whether it is the feeling, whether it is the clairvoyance and you suddenly get those words popping into your head, whether it is you suddenly hearing something and then you're led to a certain way. Your signs and synchronicities get stronger when you start to develop your intuition and understand what your dominant clair senses actually are.
Yeah.
And I love seeing this stuff.
Yeah, it's so true, because for me, the like, one of my biggest things, and it's always been is goosebumps. Like, when I have like, this, every chat we have, every meeting we have,
Goosebumps.
it's like, exactly. And literally they will, like, sometimes it's a little bit of goosebumps, other times it's like right through to the hair on my head. But for me, that is always you must pay attention, or there's some gold in this, or there's something that is, and a lot of the time for me, because I get it when I'm coaching people. So those are the moments that I know, okay, something really important has been said that I need to dig into, or I have a message related to what they're saying that will help them, guide them on their path, or a question that is formulating. But that is always, I will know almost like the most important parts of a coaching session, due to the fact that I get the goosebumps, because for me, that clairsentience is so strong for me. But the more I tune into it, the more I'm aware of it. Whereas in the beginning, I would have thought, Irish people say, "Oh, someone walked over my grave." That's like that. It's like, and it's like, okay, yeah, but
just
what does it really
coincidence?
exactly coincidence?
Yeah.
Oh, what did that really mean? But it is those things. And another thing that happens quite a lot for me is around books. So I have so many books that I am called, like, I'll buy them and I'll have great intentions of reading them, or on Audible. I do most of mine now. So I've got, loads in my library, but I firmly believe that books call to me when it's time to read them.
Yeah.
So, if I think of the Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle, I had that book for so long, and I kept trying to pick it up and read it, and it was like, no, can't read it. No, I'm falling asleep. It's not for me. And then there was one day, and it was like literally a ray of light came in through the living room window and shone down on the book. It was almost like an and I'm like, exactly. And now is the time. And I literally sat there and, just, consumed the book. It was ready for me at that point in time. But that was the sign that led me to it, that yes, this book is going to be important. Yes, you will read it at a point in time, but it's like, not now, not now, no.
The best book I've known for this is The Celestine Prophecy.
Yes.
Yep. So everyone that's read it will understand exactly what I'm about to say. I'd never heard of it at all. And in one day heard that name like 6 times, and which led me to buy it. And it has to be the exact right time for you to read it. Yes. So once you read it, you pass it on to a friend, again, intuitively pass it on to a friend, and they will read it again or they'll be handed it at the exact right time they need to hand it. But I feel like that book is so all around science and synchronicity, and has such a huge impact on your life, especially if you're quite early days in your spiritual journey.
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And it's years since I read that, but same thing happened to me. It went through a ripple through my family that we were all, and it has recently come up again because we had a conversation about it.
because we will be interviewing the author of that book, just so everybody knows. Let's just put the sign out there.
The intention out there.
Yes.
Absolutely. But it's like it came up again recently. So all these conversations, and then I kept seeing it everywhere. And it's not a case of, sometimes we wonder if Google's listening to everything we say and we suddenly start seeing it online. But this is coming up in conversations. People are talking about it, multiple places that are just, so it's almost like the messages in that book are infused with so much energy that they are drawn to people at the time when they're ready to receive the message.
Please send us a DM if you are listening to this right now and it's not the first time today that you have heard the name of the Celestine prophecy.
Yes.
Okay, just to prove our point.
Yeah, I need to reread it again now. It's like, this is again, it's like, here's my sign. And there's another thing that will happen. We'll notice the sign and we might ignore it, or we're too busy, there's something going on. So, here's a sign, here's a sign, here's a sign. So,
yes.
So
the universe will make it known. If you need to know something, it will come in a million ways.
Yeah.
Talking about books, one of my great books that I've read in the last year was Matthew McConaughey. I can't say his surname.
McConaughey.
It's a book, Green Lights.
Oh, I haven't read it. Okay.
It's his entire story of how he's looked at his life through green lights and red lights, stop and go. How certain things have fallen into place, again, synchronicities, that he's followed those signs, and these incredible experiences and meaningful encounters have happened from him following his green lights. And then also being aware of the red lights and understanding when the universe is saying not to go down a certain path.
Yes.
So yeah, I definitely highly recommend you taking a read of that.
Yeah, no, that's good. And we'll put it in the show notes. Any of the books that we reference, we'll put them in the show notes as well. It's interesting. I also have things that this used to happen quite a bit because, I've shared before that my mental health journey and my spiritual journey, like there was a time where it was getting really confusing for me. I thought I was going absolutely crazy, and really felt that my mental health was going into decline. But I started to get these hilarious signs that were coming through for me that were, so I'm not sure if anybody listening or even you, Liz, have seen this, but the movie Dogma. Have you ever seen?
No, I haven't actually.
So, okay, sorry. It's just, yeah. If you've seen it, you'll know what I mean. But Archangel Metatron is one of the characters in the movie, and it's played by Alan Rickman. But it is just the most hilarious character. Now, I was getting a lot of signs and synchronicities and people telling me, because I was working with a spiritual coach at the time, telling me that I was being surrounded by angels, that there was so much angelic energy around me, that I had a really strong connection with the angels, and that in particular Archangel Metatron was around me. And I'm like, number one, other than the movie, I hadn't really heard of Archangel Metatron. Number two, I've been raised a Catholic, and the whole idea of angels for me was just like, I was resisting this. It was like, no, sorry, this is not, I'm not getting this. So I kept resisting. But as I was going through thinking, oh my God, I'm really going crazy. My whole life is upside down. I'm making these decisions based on intuition and, where logic that other people would perceive would be the right course of action. But every time that I would have these moments where I would think I'm going crazy, and I don't mean like just, a little moment of, I think I'm going crazy. I mean, literally really worried that I was going to have another total breakdown. This ridiculous image of Archangel Metatron from the movie Dogma would just come into my head with, I am the Metatron, I am the... It's like literally enough to get me out of that kind of negative spiral or that over questioning or logic reasoning that I was finding myself spiraling into. But it was so good because now, like I have this kind of, probably a comical relationship with Archangel Metatron because of that. And I can't see it or I can't visualize it in any other way other than Alan Rickman, because that's the association. Yeah. So, other people will view these things and have, better angelic connections than I will. But for me, that was a saving grace. it was a sign, a message that kept dropping into my head when I needed it most to kind of stop me from spiraling too far or to go into a complete breakdown again. So those warning signs that we sometimes get, whether it's, a bird flying into the window, like with when my friend passed, or kind of like a saving grace to get you to course correct. So don't keep spiraling downwards, start ascending, start, believing in yourself and believing in what's happening in your spiritual experience. They're just so powerful, but they're only powerful if you tune into them and you build that muscle of tuning into them.
Absolutely. Oh, everyone should just do like a course. We should have a university program on signs and synchronicity, shouldn't we?
There's so, and this is the thing for us. We're only sharing what our experiences are. There are so many other things. So whether it's, music is another big one for me. So it's music, it's books. You mentioned about overhearing conversations. I know for me, there will be days I'll wake up and I'll think, I just need a sign in relation to, a decision that I need to make. And sometimes it could be, I'm going out to meet someone for coffee and they will say something that it's like, that's the answer to my problem. That's the guidance I needed. And
being introduced to certain people, that happens a lot with, meeting the right person at the right time.
Oh, absolutely. Like if I look at Claire Besley as an example, so it's Claire who we've interviewed on the podcast here. So I did not know Claire, did not know the background of her work. I had been having all of these signs that kept coming to me, whether it's through meditation, through dream, that I was a healer. And I was like, rejecting it. No, I'm not. No, I'm not a healer. I have no background in healing. It's not my path. But it constantly kept coming up as a sign. And then Claire, as I was doing the research for the show, I was like, the pull, the draw was unbelievable. And that led me to signing up and doing her course and now, becoming a practitioner. It's like, okay, that was put in my path. Had someone said to me, 12 months ago that, oh, you'll be doing a Spiritual as Fuck podcast and you will be, putting yourself out there to the world as a healer, I would have thought you were absolutely off your head. But all of the signs, all of the synchronicities, if I follow them, that's where it's leading me. So, who knows where your life can be in 12 months if you actually follow the signs and synchronicities. It's pretty unreal.
It really is. It really is. There's one last story that I'll share, which is kind of it, which you just made me remember. And it's actually really similar to the story you told us about the car. Years ago, when I first discovered doing oracle cards and I was reading for all my friends, and I was a backpacker at the time, actually. I remember reading for this guy and he was in a really horrible place, but he had no belief in anything metaphysical outside of this world. He was a very grounded type of normal English guy. And he really needed to get back to England and he had a family emergency. He had zero money. He was a typical backpacker. He was eating noodles every day. And the only thing he earned, can't even say, sorry, I'm losing my track of thought here. The only thing that he owned was a camper van. So I said to him during this reading, I really feel like you need to go and sell this camper van. I'm getting a feeling that it's just your prayers are going to get answered. And he was like, whatever. So anyway, he phoned me the next morning. He was like, all right, I've decided I'm going to go and try and sell the camper van. And I said, please do me a favor. I just really want to test this. Like, ask for a sign. Ask for a sign, tap in with your gut feeling on where you should go to sell this camper van. So he went off and I didn't hear from him for many, many hours. And he phoned me, it was the end of the day. And he said to me, Liz, that sign business was such a lot of crap. I've been around all of these garages all day. Nobody wants to take the van. Like, this is bullshit, pretty much. And I was like, no, don't give up. He was like, nah, I'm already driving home. As I'm on the phone to him, he's driving past someone and he was like, sorry, I've got to go. And he phoned me back afterwards to tell me what happened next. As he drove past, he saw somebody that he hadn't seen for years. In fact, this guy he'd met just traveling around the world in Thailand. And this guy he'd only known for 2 weeks, but they became really great friends in that 2 weeks. And they had such a good time, life-changing time as a backpacker in Thailand. So he pulled up and he was like, oh my God, what the hell are you doing in Brisbane? Oh my God. And this guy was like, oh, we've just landed in Australia. Yeah, I've been walking around all day. I'm really desperately trying to find a camper van so I can drive up the coast.
Yes.
He ended up selling his camper van on the spot and booking to go home for his family emergency.
Oh my God.
Divine timing and synchronicity at its finest.
Absolutely. It is a sign. Oh my gosh. And it is like, so for everybody who's listening, we just want to encourage you. It's like, yes, if you're someone who's nodding their head the whole way through this and thinking, yes, I know exactly what you're saying. I've got all the signs. I've got all the synchronicities. Keep doing that and amplify it. As Liz had said earlier, that is the key to your psychic abilities and opening your psychic gifts as well. If you're someone who is thinking, oh, maybe some of that does happen to me, start tuning into it, start journaling it, start putting it, take your screenshots if you're like me, whatever it is, or even say it out loud to other people, or, send us the message on Instagram and let us know what's going on for you. But it is so important. Just build this muscle. We always like to give you a little bit of homework or things to reflect on as we go from episode to episode. But I would like you to just reflect. There's another wonderful quote from Carl Jung that I mentioned at the beginning, which is, synchronicity is an ever-present reality for those who have eyes to see. So if you don't have eyes, if you're not tuning into it, all of this glorious stuff just passes you by. But when you tap into it, when you tune into it, it opens up a universe of possibilities for you. So this, if you're listening to this podcast, this in itself is a sign. If you're nodding your head to any of this or even curious about it, this is a sign. So please continue the conversation, whether it is on Instagram with us, whether it is sending us, like we've had so many people reach out by email, by a direct message, or just letting us know what's happening. Keep that coming. But we also encourage you to sign up for the channel if you want to come and actually chat to us face to face and share your stories. But most importantly, just click that follow button on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, and just, stay tuned in, because these are the things, these are your signs that you're on the right path as well. And you're a part of our sign that we're doing the right work that we're meant to be doing. So on that note, we will see you in the next episode. That's it for another episode.
Thank you for listening. Did you know that we are building a movement of 1 million people who are spiritual as fuck? We would love for you to join us. You can start by leaving us a review on Apple Podcast. Every month, I'm going to intuitively choose one person and do a psychic reading for you. So
follow us on Instagram, send in your stories and topic suggestions, and join the movement
at spiritual.a.f. Until next time.
This is a Guide Your Light Network production, creating podcasts with purpose.